I'm Carrie Campbell. I am the business growth and lead coaching guru with the Dog Gurus. I'm here with Susan Briggs, our co-founder. Say hello, Susan.
Hi.
The Dog Gurus are doing a Facebook Live today. We'll be talking about leadership with dogs. But to start off, we are a consulting business that likes to help pet care businesses launch, grow, and profit. We offer staff training programs as well as business consulting programs. And there we've got some people saying hello. So we are here live. Awesome. All right. I will be putting in the chat. We have a Facebook group called Grow Your Pet Care Business. And so I will put the link in the chat box for that. But Susan, I will let you kick us off with our topic of the day.
I know we're starting the new year talking about leadership with dogs, which really goes back to our roots as to why the Dog Gurus even got started. It's always been about doing better with the dogs. We started with our book, Off Leash Dog Play. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is based on the information out of that book. But you know, what we found this goes way back to when I had my pet business, Urban Tales, here in Houston. We started with people that just had working with the dogs and were good with the dogs. But then we realized that there were things that you could do that you could train staff and teach people to have better leadership skills with dogs. And so that was a really fun part of our book to research. And it starts about being fun and engaging with the dogs. And I know, Carrie, that was a big part of what you guys did at Dog Tired. And what kind of the basics did you get people started with, or what were your kind of recommendations on how to just start building that relationship with dogs that came to your daycare?
I think that was really key for our staff. Like you said, building that relationship or that rapport with dogs, because it was very easy to walk into a room and see who had the least rapport with a dog and pointing that out to them, that the more the dogs were engaged with them, the more that they trusted them and they created that relationship, the more the dogs were willing to do whatever they asked. So it's that mutual respect that the dogs knew that they were safe because the leader in the group had their back. So one of the things that we did every January was our favorite time of year as we were prepping for the daycare games, but just reinforcing those simple activities that you could do, asking the dogs for a sit, using some basic commands to redirect behaviors. So when they're working in that component of getting that group sit or the gate boundary exercise, that each of the staff kind of saw those instant rewards from doing those activities and helping to build that relationship.
And I love that you said just asking for behaviors you want or the cues. And I think it goes back to the basics, that if you don't communicate with the dogs and ask them to do something, then they're going to fill their time doing what they want to do, which sometimes is fine and sometimes it's not. But the other thing that I like to see, especially out of guys that worked with us, was just talking to the dogs sometimes and just having this short conversation and using the praise. I think we don't often praise when they're being good. We just want to correct when they're doing things that they don't want to do. And so I think for most of the pet dogs we see, making sure that you do have that conversation, but in a conversational tone, not the whole baby high-pitched.
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also pats and where dogs like to be touched, not on the top of the head, but like under the chin or on the chest. Archie will back up and you can rub his butt above his tail, then he's in heaven. And so learning each dog where their favorite touching spots are and just giving some love that way, I think is a great way to also build a relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, you were talking about that, the whole touching point too. We would see staff that would come in and immediately do that fast scritching. And that is so stimulating for dogs that can actually create a behavior that you don't necessarily want. You can just get a dog too stimulated. So finding those key touching spots that the dogs enjoy, but giving them some love in a more soft stroke and not necessarily getting them all overstimulated. The other thing too, when you were talking about the baby tones and voices, we would often hear where maybe a dog would start barking and then you would hear a staff member saying, whatever the word is, we use the word quiet to get them to stop barking. If the staff person is just barking back, it just becomes this conversation. So using the correct tone of voice and making sure that you're being effective in maybe once or twice and using that command or that cue. And if that's not effective, then you need to, if you're sitting down, you need to get up and go ask for an alternative behavior and stop that before it just continues to be this long conversation of you barking at the dog and the dog barking back at you.
Yeah, absolutely. Drives me crazy. So we're happy to answer questions also. So be sure to put in the chat if you have any questions on helping your team members become better leaders with the dogs. I love, Carrie, you mentioned at the beginning, having their back. And I think one of the best ways to help your staff have the backs of the dogs that are in their play groups is to make sure they understand and read the canine body language, because it's making sure that dogs aren't putting into positions where they don't feel safe. And for us, safety means not only physical safety, but emotional and mental well-being as well. So you need to understand that dog that may be just a wallflower, is his body posture saying, oh, I'm just chilling over here by the wall, or am I tucked up and uncomfortable and stressed because of something, activity, or another dog in the room that might be staring or stalking. So making sure they understand the body language and will intervene to make sure every dog in the group is not only physically safe, but mentally and emotionally well.
We used to, when we would give tours at our facility, we used to always tell pet parents that the leader in that group is there to help the least secure dog feel comfortable and safe, and the most confident dog understand that they're not going to get away with certain things because we're going to redirect those behaviors and not have them doing that stalking or bullying behavior.
Yeah,
it's very true.
That is such a key point. And those are a lot of the basics as far as developing the relationship is really got to be the focus. And so you've got to have team members that generally enjoy dog behavior and being with dogs and wanting to have a positive, benevolent relationship with mutual trust and respect. But over the years, we have in this industry created games that can help people. And I think for new staff, one of the best games is the hula hoop game, which is where we put a hula hoop, and you don't have to have a hula hoop, but the hula hoop, can't say that 3 times fast, creates that visual boundary around you, and it can help new leaders find their posture and presence to take space from the dogs. And this is not kicking or swinging arms, it's just moving small footsteps frontwards, backwards, to the side, to keep the dogs out of the hula hoop so that they're respecting your space. Because I'm sure you may not have even hired people, but I know I saw people that some leaders that you can walk in and the dogs are cool and just walk around, and then others, they just jump all over them and have poor behavior. And so the hula hoop can help those people that are getting jumped all over to have a better leadership presence.
Yeah, that confident posture versus kind of that victim posture. So we have a couple questions here. Melissa asked, what's the best way to get dogs to get along? That's a long question.
Yeah, and some of that goes to how you're screening dogs to be accepted into your play groups. And so you want to understand play styles as well. And so it's number one, making sure that you're accepting dogs that do have the social skills you want to see and the behaviors you want to see in your play groups. And then 2 would be, I'm a big believer in having multiple groups. And I think you are too, Carrie, because you have different classrooms. And so it's putting dogs together that have similar and compatible play styles. And that's where I would start. I don't know about you.
No, I agree. I think, it depending on what your facility layout is, even if you can just start with a separation of big dogs and little dogs, that's your basic safety line. But then we used to have within kind of the separation of big dogs and little dogs, we had 3 different groups in each of those sizes. One that was our either older dogs or more vulnerable dogs, and very shy young dogs would be in that one group. And then we had that middle energy group that had common play styles, but it wasn't that high intensity play that was was all day. It was more an ebb and flow. And then there was that more young, energetic, exuberant, high intensity play. So that may help, Melissa, as far as just giving you a baseline of where to start with that. But I agree with Susan. I think the screening or the evaluation process that you use to admit dogs into your program is probably key. And then Allison had a question. How often do you have staff that are good staff, but not as good with the dogs leadership wise? She's a bit softer. So the naughty dogs take advantage of that fence fighting when they know the behaviors. Maybe you can clarify that question. But I think she's talking about having a leader who may be a little bit more soft in their personality or their presence. And like you said, Susan, where they walk in the room and those dogs take advantage of that right away and start jumping up on them. I think it's maybe going back to that, having that confident posture and how they are with the dogs. And I think there's a difference between leading the dogs and then just being a friend to the dogs, because otherwise you become another dog that's in that group and you're not actually doing things that are setting that boundary between what you're doing. They're not all your pet dogs. You're there to do a job and make them safe and be the leader of that group to control that safety aspect.
Yeah, and I think giving her some exercises and tools that she uses when she's in the dog's lake for fence fighting, what I would do would be get my back to the fence, so I'm facing the dogs, and then use body blocking to walk between them and back them off the fence. And so making sure she knows when to use her different tools. The other thing, we talked about the hula hoop game, but there's other leadership exercises that we recommend all your staff members practice on every shift that they're with the dogs. And Carrie, you talked about group sits. It's a great way to get the dogs to focus on you, to have self-control going into a sit. And it's fun for your team members to see how many dogs they can get in a group sit and for how long, that duration. Starting out shorter and with fewer numbers of the dogs, but as they get experience, they should be able to do more dogs and for a longer sit duration. And so that's a game. You can make it a game to where it's fun for the staff and the dogs that will help the dogs see her as a leader. And so she's asking for some behavior. So I love group sits. That's one of our recommended activities and games. And then do you want to talk about how to do like recall as a game and
Sure.
how that can help with leadership?
Yeah, and then we have a couple of other questions after that. Yeah, because one of the things that I think is really important when you're working on that recall component is if they don't have that relationship or that rapport, a dog isn't going to want to come to them. And again, that's really evident too, especially I think when you're working in the daycare games component and you've got that kind of novice, intermediate, and advanced level of handlers. Those novice handlers, sometimes you will see someone who just has that natural rapport with dogs and they get that exercise very quickly. Whereas others who may not have figured out yet just exactly how to build that relationship or that rapport with the dogs, they really struggle with this particular activity or this game. So the gist of it is that you call a dog to you, you can use their name once, and then they have a certain amount of time, depending on level in the novice, intermediate, or advanced handler, that the dog has to come to them. So you can do things that are fun. You can make a gesture that makes you very inviting to have the dog come to you. You can't just keep repeating their name. So that's an activity that we actually would have staff do quite frequently. We would do some handling challenges. So one of the other things we would do is say that for today on your shift, you cannot raise your voice over a certain tone or like a certain decibel. And part of that was then, how do you get a dog to come to you when you're being very quiet and it's more intimate, and seeing how quickly they will do that recall to you? Are you being more inviting, or are you just saying their name very sternly? Because who's going to want to come to that? It's not as inviting. Just different challenges that are there. We have somebody else asked, do you find there's a critical number of dogs needed to start a new group?
That's a great question. We do say that one staff member can safely watch anywhere from 8 to 12 dogs, and it depends on the level of activity. So like your seniors and less timid dogs, you could go up to 12, but that really high energy active group, you probably kept more like 8, maybe even 6. And so you have to balance what's safe as far as leadership for the dogs, as well as, of course, budget. We would talk about making money doing this, so you've got to make sure you price right if you have smaller groups. I think you'll find smaller groups, the dogs will play more and be more active the smaller you can keep your groups, but it is a balance. I don't know, what were your parameters on that, Carrie?
Yeah, we definitely were looking at what our staff to dog ratio was. And then again, based on what their activity level was, you want to make sure that in those high intensity groups that one staff member can easily manage it, and that all of the dogs are safe and, like you said, emotionally happy or emotionally safe as well. Because you don't ever want to see that dog who kind of becomes a wallflower because the level of the play is too intense for them. And maybe that's just shifting them to a different play group, but just making sure that safety level is the number one factor. Let's see, we also have, there's one other question that's here, but some of them have scrolled up. Besides daycare games or training, how do you make them out of the, or take them out of the friend zone? She understands the body languages and the tools, but I guess she's looking for that individual. This is the same person who was talking about that may not be the strongest leader. The dogs were jumping on them. Some other things that you could do body language wise to help them get out of that friend zone.
Yeah, I think the key thing is she may know the tools, but is she using them? And is she using them effectively to where the dogs see her as a leader? And I think maybe describing her to her what you're looking for as far as the dogs viewing her as a leader, which means they're not going to be jumping all over her, which if they still are, then she does need to work on her posture and presence and using body blocking. Is she using the body blocking to interrupt fence fighting, or is she using distractions and drawing those boundaries so the dogs know that she has their back, but she's also not going to let them get to the point where they're practicing behaviors you don't want to see in your daycare. So I think I've seen this a lot because I've spent a lot of time out in play groups, and even though people know what they're supposed to do, are they using it appropriately? And I think that's where you may need to do some coaching with her and maybe even talk about scenarios and say, okay, if this happens, what would you do? What tool would you put in place? And have some conversations along that line.
Consistency is a key as well. I know we used to have individuals that this is your toolbox. These are all the things that you have. And they may go through 3 or 4 of them and feel like none of them are working. So then they just abandon them. And it's, yes, you used to use this tool, but you have to use it over and over because, that's how the dogs are going to learn, by that association and that repetition. Another activity that we used to do is just that follow the leader game, where you just start walking maybe the perimeter of the play area and just see how many dogs start following you because they're curious, what are you doing? And I used to love to do that, and then to just like stop. And how many dogs would just sit without me having to ask them to sit, and then start again, and then suddenly change directions and just make this little path around the room. But it was really interesting to see the dogs that were so curious what I was doing that they'd start to follow.
Yeah, I love the follow the leader game. I'm glad you brought that up. See, well, there's so many games, and that oftentimes you have to refresh your team's memory. So like you said, Carrie, doing a leadership challenge every day of a different game or activity to engage in. And the beautiful thing is it is a game, but it also reinforces that you're the leader of the group.
Absolutely. Going back to that building relationship and rapport, one of the things that we used to do was have the staff go in and pick in the play group the dog that was their least favorite. Because often we have our favorites and we have those that maybe you just haven't found something to connect with that dog, or that dog has a certain behavior that is, they're in that adolescent phase and they're like humping or doing something that's inappropriate, and it just gets annoying to a staff person. So we would make them pick that dog and then find something, whether it was a physical trait about the dog or whether it was something else about their personality, but something about that dog that they really appreciated. It may not be that they loved it, but they appreciated that about the dog, and that maybe that dog just had this way of connecting with a new dog and kind of befriending and being a good for that new dog that's in the room, and just finding whatever that component was of the dog that was your least favorite to help build that rapport with that one individual dog.
Yeah. So before we run out of time, I want to make sure we talk about our third activity that we do in the daycare games. And this is our gate boundary activity, which I think sometimes is the most challenging for newer staff members to master. But it's also, I think, one of the most important activities, especially on that consistency thing that you said, is keeping the gate safe and claiming that space around the gate as yours, so that as dogs enter and exit, they're not getting mobbed. It's a huge thing for safety, physical safety, as well as the emotional well-being. So did you have any tips on training gate boundary?
So for us, it was the consistency in words. We had a printout on the wall that was the cues or the words that we used with the dogs, and it was very simple. We tried to have short words that were in, inside, or out, outside, but usually it was just in and out. And so if we were heading from the inside play group to the outside yard, we would have the dogs wait. That was the word. We didn't have them stay. We used wait. And then it would be out if we were going outside. And it was always so interesting to see a new staff member who came up with 1,000 variations of words. Come on, let's go. And it was just like the dogs looked so confused to them. We just said, what are the words that we use? It's right on the wall. And then all of a sudden they would say out, and the dogs would go. And if you've done the daycare games for kind of year after year, it's always interesting to see the dogs who know exactly, oh, it's that time of year again, and we're going to practice all of these tools. And I think the pet parents even start to see that the dogs are waiting inside to go outside, and they would ask us, what's that cue? What's that release word that you're using? But yeah, so I think the key is just being really consistent with the words, and then sharing with them what is the width of the gate. If you want to start in the beginning, just barely open the door and use body blocking as a tool for that space that you have open with that gate or that doorway. And then as they get more confident with working with a group of dogs, they can open that and have them wait a wider open space. We have a couple other questions. Somebody asked really quick, how do we incorporate 5 dogs that live in the same household, but they all want to be the alpha? I would not necessarily have them in the same play group.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
I would even say have them come on separate days if you're just looking at a daycare type situation and not a lodging situation. But yeah, if they're having a challenge with that, I would definitely recommend that they are in different play groups, because that's better for them anyways, to be able to have their own social. And maybe not all 5 of them are right for daycare. That may be another thing, is that some of them may be great in a group setting and some may be better with a small group dog walker. Yeah. But so the daycare games.
Yes. Every year. This is like, we're coming up on, this could be our 10th year. Oh my gosh. I don't know. 9th or 10th.
Yeah.
Because
2004.
Anyway, we always do it in February, because the first year we did it, it was the Winter Olympics. And so we aligned with that. And this year's daycare games registration opened up yesterday. You can definitely get your spot. And what we do is, your business is like the country. And so you register your business and then you compete against others. And we do separate by sizes so that the smaller businesses compete against smaller businesses to try to keep things fair. And then your team members are the individuals that compete. And as Carrie talked about, we look at and you register them to either be novice, intermediate, or advanced. So again, they're competing against people in their same categories. And we have them perform each week one of the 3 exercises. So one week they recall and you report in scores. And then the next week, I think, is group sit. And then I think the last week is gate boundary, but don't hold me to that. It is one activity each week. And there's a timeline of when you have to submit your scores. And then Amy, our dear admin Amy of the daycare games, will determine the medals, and we give virtual medals, gold, silver, and this is a great way to share with your pet parents and even the media in your marketplace the positive things you're doing to manage the dogs. It's a great way for staff to get to brag on themselves as they're winning medals. And it's just been a lot of fun. Like I say, I think this is maybe our 9th year of the daycare games. I know Carrie, Dog Tired, competed all the time. You guys were awesome. And
we always tried to come up with something fun to do. That was, we got the virtual medals, and sometimes we would just print those off and cut them out and then have a little aluminum medal that we ordered off of Amazon or something, so that we actually had a physical medal that we could put on them at the end of the 3 weeks. So we did our own little closing ceremonies, and it was just fun to come up with different ways. One year we had some name tags printed that like acrylic. And so depending on what their medals were for each of the events, some people, it was like a 3-time gold medal winner, 2 golds and a silver. And so that was just fun to have something to give them in the end, just rewarding all of the fun that we had over the 3 weeks. But really, I think the benefit of it is to continue throughout the year and just not only practice for the 3 weeks of kind of the competition, but to use those tools throughout the year, because it does help them manage play groups much better.
Yeah, we did have somebody tell us one time that the light bulb went off that the dogs were better behaved during the daycare games because they were doing all this engagement and work and competition, and they could see it in the dog's behavior. And so you're right. If you're take that then and hold that as your benchmark and expectation of team members all year, it'll be great. Plus they'll win a lot of gold medals. I can tell you that. So it is a fun way. It's a fun thing, I think, to do in February, which is often sometimes slower for your team members, and it's as fun as you make it. But we love, you get to submit pictures and videos. We share that on social media. We have a hashtag that you can post things, and then we do create a closing ceremonies video that you get to share. And I get touched. I love that every year. I look so forward to seeing that video. So I think, Carrie, you put the link that they can go and check it out.
Yeah, it's in the box. And then the other one I was going to put is the Grow Your Pet Care Business Facebook group link, so that you have access to that as well. And that's a free group to join, but there's 2 rules, Susan?
Yes, 2 rules. You have to be nice, and you can't sell stuff, because Robin will kick you out. So yeah. It's a great group to get input and feedback. And if you've never participated in the daycare games and want to know about it, ask that question, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of responses from people as to how it works and how they make it fun and make it work in there. So if you go register early, because we do cap how many businesses we can take. So you want to get registered as early as possible. Plus you can start practicing, because you'll get the guidelines, and it's all kind of self-monitored. We don't check up on you, but it's that oath that I'm going to follow the daycare games guidelines, so you can get your team excited and get started. But it'll be here before you know it. And so we would love to have you join us. And like we talked about, all of the things, the work that you put in, I think you'll see benefits all year long with the dogs, and help your team members be better leaders, which is what it's all about.
Yep. And then lastly, we also have, is the store still up where you can get the Daycare Games t-shirts and other items for staff?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think once you register, you get a link to the store. So another reason to register early is you can get logoed gear of the daycare games. I think we have one of the cutest logos out of all of our logos, and we have a lot of them. I love the daycare games logo. I was just looking at it today, and yeah, you can get t-shirts, cups, bags, and use that to promote that you're participating and to inspire your team members to better their skills.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. All right. Wow. 30 minutes. See, it just flew by.
It did.
It's our favorite topic.
Yeah. So we look forward to seeing you guys compete soon.
Yeah. Have a great day.